As protesters continue to gather on Rustaveli Avenue in front of Georgia's parliament, demanding the release of political prisoners, new parliamentary elections, democratic reform, and a continuation of Georgia's EU accession process, a defining feature of the movement has been the involvement of young people. In 2023, for example, when several nights of fervent protest successfully led to the first draft of the foreign agent law being abandoned by the Georgian Dream government, images of youth waving EU and Georgian flags, sparring with police clad in riot gear, and dodging water cannons while braving tear gas dominated media coverage. Considering media's focus on youth in Georgia's protest movements, one has to wonder, are young Georgians more politically engaged than their older peers? Welcome to the CRRC-Georgia Podcast. In this episode, we'll be exploring youth civic engagement through analysis of 2024 and 2013 Caucasus Barometer data and CRRC-Georgia and Caucasian House's 2021 Survey on Youth Civic and Political Engagement and Participation in Peacebuilding. Via analysis, we'll explore avenues in which Georgian youth choose to engage in politics. Before jumping into our analysis, let's briefly address some of the methodologies used in the cited studies. The primary dataset under examination derives from the 2024 Caucasus Barometer, a nationally representative survey of Georgia's adult population conducted since 2007. The analytical approach compares 2024 data with comparable data from the 2013 Caucasus Barometer, examining three age cohorts: 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 and older. The 2021 survey on youth civic and political engagement and participation in peacebuilding focused specifically on youth aged 18 to 29 years old. This survey provides data comparing what may be termed Gen Z, operationalized as individuals aged 18 to 25, with young millennials aged 26 to 29. The analytical models employed in this survey include ethnicity, settlement type, education level, gender, and age group as predictor variables. The data reveals an important distinction between democratic values and confidence in democratic institutions. With respect to normative support for democracy, youth cohorts demonstrate levels comparable to older age groups. Over 60% of respondents across all age categories express the belief that democracy is preferable to alternative government systems. This support has remained essentially unchanged over the past decade. Regarding mommy state ideology, the concept that government should operate as a parental figure rather than as an entity accountable to its citizens, the data show support of this belief remains relatively stable among younger age groups at 46% over the last decade. The 55 plus age group registered a modest 4% point decline in this belief between 2013 and 2024 to 47%. However, when we examine trust in democratic institutions, a markedly different pattern emerges. The researchers constructed an aggregated trust index encompassing 9 institutions fundamental to democratic functioning, from parliament to political parties, media organizations, civil society organizations, and the ombudsman, among others. The 2024 data demonstrates a statistically significant negative correlation between age and institutional trust. Specifically, predicted trust scores increased by 18 percentage points for the oldest respondent cohort relative to the youngest. Examining the index's components, in 2024, there are statistically significant and positive correlations between age and trust in the following institutions: parliaments, the executive government, political parties, the media, and local government. Critically, this age-based difference in institutional trust represents a recent development. Comparison with 2013 data reveals that age was not a statistically significant predictor of aggregated institutional trust a decade ago. In contrast to the data from 2024, in 2013, trust in NGOs was the only trust variable significantly and negatively associated with age. Young people demonstrated comparable levels of institutional confidence to older cohorts in most areas. This suggests that the intervening decade has witnessed a particular erosion of institutional trust among younger Georgians. When imagining civic engagement, voting is perhaps the first thought people have. However, the empirical evidence regarding youth voting behavior in Georgia reveals contrary trends in this regard that challenge the projection of youth being more engaged in civics, or at least in this form of democratic expression. Analysis of reported participation in previous elections reveals an 18 percentage point decline among the youngest age cohort between 2013 and 2024. This represents a reduction 3 times greater than the decline observed among older age groups, which experienced approximately 6 percentage point reductions each. The magnitude and specificity of this decline among youth warrants serious analytical attention. Prospective voting intentions follow a similar trajectory. While willingness to participate in forthcoming elections has declined across all age categories, the reduction is most pronounced among young people, showing a 13% point decrease compared to more modest declines among older cohorts. This suggests that the disengagement is not merely a historical artifact, but represents an ongoing trajectory with future implications. A potentially explanatory variable emerges when examining perceptions of electoral integrity. Trust in the fairness of electoral processes has declined substantially across all age groups, but the decline is particularly acute among young people. In 2013, all age cohorts demonstrated relatively comparable and elevated levels of trust in electoral fairness. By 2024, youth confidence in electoral integrity had declined by 35 percentage points, resulting in less than half of young people expressing trust in electoral fairness. By contrast, older age groups experienced approximately 20 percentage point declines. This dramatic erosion of confidence in electoral integrity provides a rational basis for electoral abstention. If the public does not believe electoral processes produce legitimate outcomes that accurately reflect popular preferences, participation in such processes becomes difficult to justify from a rational choice perspective. The data thus suggests that youth electoral disengagement may represent a response that differs from older generations to perceived institutional failure. Political party identification serves as a crucial intermediary variable, linking public preferences to electoral participation. The 2024 data illuminates important patterns regarding partisan alignment across age cohorts. Younger respondents demonstrate greater propensity toward opposition party identification relative to older respondents, who show stronger alignment with the ruling Georgian Dream Party. However, the most analytically significant finding concerns non identification. Across all age groups, the modal response to party identification questions is none of the listed parties. Additionally, at least 1/5 of respondents in each age category declined to answer party identification questions entirely. In other words, young people demonstrate particularly high rates of nonpartisanship. While voting among youth shows declining trends, patterns of non electoral political engagement present a more complex picture. The data reveals shifting attitudes toward contentious political participation, particularly protest activity, alongside paradoxical trends in actual participation rates. Public acceptance of protests as a legitimate form of political participation has increased across all age cohorts over the past decade. The younger generation's acceptance of protests has grown by 22 percentage points, reaching 79% in 2024. This represents near consensus among young Georgians that protest constitutes an appropriate mechanism for expressing political dissent. This pattern aligns with observable youth presence in recent mass mobilizations, particularly demonstrations opposing the foreign agent law. The 2021 Youth Survey also reveals varied levels of stated political interest across these youth cohorts. Specifically, 41% of young millennials aged 26 to 29 reported being interested in politics, compared with 30% of Gen Z aged 18 to 25 expressing direct interest. Further, when examining political interest by demographic characteristics from the same survey, several patterns emerge. Young people in rural areas are 6 percentage points more likely to be interested in politics than people in Tbilisi, with people in urban areas other than Tbilisi falling somewhere between the two. Women are 7 percentage points more likely to be interested in Georgian politics than men. People with higher education are 26 and 37 percentage points more likely to report they're interested in politics compared to people with a secondary education or a vocational education, respectively. Demographic analysis of the 2021 Youth Survey data identified educational attainment and ethnicity as the strongest predictors of political engagement among young people. Individuals with a tertiary education engaged in listed activities more than those possessing other education levels, controlling for other factors. Ethnic minority youth participated in 1/3 more political actions on average compared with ethnic Georgian youth. However, a significant contradiction emerges when examining reported participation in non electoral activities in the Caucasus Barometer data. Despite increased acceptance of protests and other forms of contentious participation, actual reported engagement in such activities has declined by at least 10 percentage points across all age groups over the past decade between 2013 and 2024. The middle aged cohort experienced the most substantial decline in this form of participation. Still, young people remain significantly more likely than older cohorts to participate in protests, petition signing, activities organized by NGOs, and online activism. Nevertheless, the overall trajectory indicates declining rather than increasing non electoral participation across the population, including among youth. The patterns documented present several interesting takeaways. Young people express normative support for democracy while demonstrating declining trust in democratic institutions. They endorse protests as legitimate political action while reporting decreased actual participation in such activities. They are also highly visible in certain mobilization events while participating less in previous electoral processes. They also report political interest, however, without consistently translating that interest into participatory behaviors across all forms of political engagement. So, returning to our initial question, are young people more politically engaged than older generations? The data presents the following patterns. On certain dimensions of political engagement, particularly acceptance of contentious participation and involvement in non electoral activism, young people demonstrate higher levels than older cohorts. They report greater willingness to participate in demonstrations, sign petitions, and engage in political activity through digital platforms. On electoral participation measures, young people demonstrate substantially lower engagement than older cohorts. Between 2013 and 2024, the youngest age group experienced an 18 percentage point decline in reported voting, compared to 6 percentage point declines among older groups. Trust in electoral fairness among young people declined by 35 percentage points, compared to approximately 20 percentage point declines among older groups. Regarding institutional trust, the 2024 data shows younger respondents report lower trust scores, with an 18 percentage point difference between the youngest and oldest age groups. This represents a change from 2013 when age was not a statistically significant predictor of institutional trust. Regarding party identification, the modal response across all age groups is none of the listed parties, with young people showing particularly high rates of nonpartisanship. The combination of increased interest and support for democracy, but lack of resonance in existing parties and distrust in institutions, appears to have manifested in the paradox of low voter turnout among youth, but higher interest, support, and engagement in protest movements compared to older generations. Should trust in institutions and feelings of representation in politics increase, perhaps engagement in voting processes would follow. But for the time being, it appears that youth are more politically engaged, just in some processes more than others. Thank you for joining us for this analysis. For the articles cited in this episode, check out the links in the episode's description. For more studies like this, you can head to our website, crrc.ge. Until next time.